Welcome to another K-Whisper Blasian love story. Relax, grab some popcorn, and enjoy this heartwarming journey. The smell of bleach clung to Amaka's hands no matter how often she scrubbed them with soap. She stared down at her palms as the water in the sink swirled, carrying away the suds. It didn't matter. By the time the night ended, she would be holding another rag, another mop, wiping down another floor that would never be hers. She was tired. But tiredness had long become a constant companion since moving to Seoul 2 years ago. She wasn't here for comfort. She was here for survival. Each paycheck she earned, she sent a good portion back home to Nigeria, enough to pay for her younger brother's school fees and to keep food on the table for her widowed mother. The city was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't always kind. The language was hard to learn. The people often looked past her as if she didn't exist, and the jobs she could find were all the kind others refused to do. Still, Amaka carried herself with quiet dignity. She had come this far. She would not give up now. That morning, she stood outside an iron gate that loomed higher than her head. The address on the slip of paper in her hand matched the golden numbers fixed to the gate. This was it, the Kong residence. Her supervisor had told her the family was wealthy, one of the richest in the district. Billionaire. Conglomerate. She had heard the words, but they meant little to her. Wealth was a distant world. All she knew was that she had been assigned here as a live-in cleaner. It was steady work and that was enough. A guard buzzed her in, and Amaka found herself walking up a path lined with cherry blossoms just beginning to bloom. The mansion rose before her like something from a movie. Tall, glass windows that reflected the morning light, and stone walls that seemed both beautiful and intimidating. Inside, the house smelled of polish and fresh flowers. A head maid gave her a quick tour. The vast living room, the spotless kitchen, the long hallways lined with art. Do your work quietly. The master dislikes noise, the woman instructed sharply. And above all, stay out of trouble. Amaka nodded obediently. She was good at following rules. But as she unpacked her cleaning supplies, she felt eyes on her. Turning, she saw a little girl at the end of the hallway, peeking around a doorway. The child couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. Her hair was tied neatly with ribbons, her dress crisp and expensive. Amaka smiled instinctively. Hello there. The girl blinked, as though startled to be spoken to. Then slowly, she stepped out from behind the wall. Her eyes were wide, cautious but curious. Are you new? The girl asked softly, her Korean laced with the tentative tone of a child and used to speaking to strangers. Yes. Amaka replied gently, switching to the little Korean she knew. Her accent was heavy, but her warmth carried through. My name is Amaka. What's your name? The girl hesitated before answering. Kong Hannah. Such a pretty name, Amaka thought. Nice to meet you, Hannah, she said, her smile widening. The girl studied her for another moment, then gave the faintest of smiles before darting back into the room she had come from. Amaka chuckled quietly to herself and returned to her work. She didn't know it yet, but that small exchange would be the first of many, and the beginning of a bond that would change everything. That evening, she finally caught sight of Hannah's father. Kong Ji-hoon walked into the foyer with a kind of commanding presence that made the air feel heavier. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit. He carried himself with effortless authority. His face was striking but unreadable. The expression of a man who had forgotten how to smile. Appa! Hannah's little voice rang out as she ran to greet him. Ji-hoon's stern expression softened only slightly as he bent down to pat his daughter's head. Did you behave today? Yes, she said, nodding quickly. Her gaze flicked to Amaka, who stood quietly in the corner with her mop. Ji-hoon followed his daughter's eyes and noticed her for the first time. His gaze was sharp, assessing, the kind that made Amaka straighten unconsciously. She lowered her head politely. The new cleaner, the head maid explained quickly. Ji-hoon gave a curt nod, his attention already shifting back to Hannah. With one arm, he scooped his daughter up and carried her inside. Amaka exhaled slowly, only then realizing she had been holding her breath. She had met many employers before, some kind, some indifferent, some harsh. She wasn't sure yet which kind Kong Ji-hoon would be. But as she returned to her work, the sound of Hannah's laughter echoing faintly down the hall, Amaka felt something stir in her chest. This house might be cold, but maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't always feel that way. The Kong residence was silent in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed on the ears, thick and heavy, like a reminder that the house was far too big for the people who lived in it. Amaka had worked in many homes before. Small apartments filled with noise, laughter, even arguments. But this mansion, for all its polished beauty, felt lonely. The walls gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, and every corner smelled of expensive fragrances. Yet, beneath it all, there was an emptiness she couldn't ignore. Her days began early. By 6 in the morning, she was already scrubbing floors that didn't look dirty, polishing silver that was already shining. The head maid, Mrs. Choi, ran the household like a military base. Every task was timed, every corner inspected. "Do not linger in the master's study," Mrs. Choi warned one afternoon as Amaka carried a tray of cleaning cloths. "And do not attempt to speak to him unless spoken to. He values order and discipline above all." Amaka nodded obediently. She had no intention of crossing any lines. Work was work. But even as she cleaned, she couldn't help noticing things about Kong Ji-hoon. Every morning, he left the house at precisely 7:30. His shoes clicking against the marble floors, his phone already pressed to his ear. Every evening, he returned close to 9, his tie loosened, his expression carved in stone. He was efficient, controlled, the kind of man whose presence demanded respect without words. Yet, there was always a shadow in his eyes, a heaviness that no wealth could erase. And then there was Hannah. The little girl was often left in the care of tutors and nannies, but she drifted toward Amaka whenever she could. Sometimes, she would sit quietly at the edge of the room while Amaka dusted the shelves. Other times, she would follow her from hallway to hallway, small footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. "Don't you have toys to play with?" Amaka asked gently one afternoon, glancing down at Hannah who was clutching a picture book. "I do," Hannah said softly, "but it's more fun here." Amaka's chest ached at the innocence of the reply. The girl wasn't looking for toys. She was looking for company. Little by little, Hannah began to open up. She would ask Amaka questions in her tiny voice, where she was from, why her skin was darker than the others, if she missed her family. Amaka answered honestly, weaving her words carefully in broken Korean and simple English. "I am from Nigeria," she explained one evening as they sat in the kitchen, Amaka peeling apples while Hannah swung her legs from the counter stool. "It is far away. Hot sun, many people, loud streets. My family is still there." Hannah's eyes widened. "Do you miss them?" "Every day," Amaka admitted, her voice soft. "But I work hard so they can live well." The child went quiet for a moment, nibbling on a slice of apple Amaka had handed her. Then, almost shyly, she whispered, "I miss my mama too." Amaka's hands froze. She didn't ask, but she knew. The emptiness in this house wasn't just silence, it was absence. That night, Amaka found herself thinking about Hannah long after she had gone to her small servant's room. She thought of the little girl's lonely eyes, the way she followed her around, the unspoken need in her voice when she said the word mama. It was no wonder then, that when Ji-hoon came home late one evening, Amaka noticed the way Hannah brightened at the sound of the front door opening. "Appa!" Hannah ran across the room, her little arms reaching for him. Ji-hoon bent down, scooping her up in his arms. "Were you good today?" "Yes," Hannah answered, but her smile was quick to fade when Ji-hoon set her down and immediately reached for his briefcase. He was tired, and his mind was already on the next business call. From where she stood in the corner, Amaka saw the flicker of disappointment in Hannah's face. Later that night, as she was wiping the banister, Amaka overheard two maids whispering. "The master has never remarried," one said in a hushed voice. "He still carries the weight of his wife's death." "It's been years," the other replied. "But he doesn't let anyone close. Not family, not friends. He only has the company and the child." Amaka lowered her gaze, her heart stirring. She didn't know why it mattered to her, but something about this family, about the little girl who clung to her presence, about the man who locked his heart behind walls of steel, pulled at her. Perhaps it was fate. Or perhaps it was something far simpler. Two worlds, two lives, that were about to collide in ways none of them expected. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, the rhythm of life in the Kong household shifted. At least for Hannah. Started with small moments. Amaka would be dusting the shelves in the library, and Hannah would appear quietly, clutching her picture book. She wouldn't say anything at first, just sit cross-legged on the rug, watching. One afternoon, Hannah finally asked, "Can you read this to me?" Amaka hesitated, glancing at the polished shelves and the silent walls. This wasn't part of her duties. But when she looked at Hannah's hopeful eyes, something inside her softened. "I can try," she said, her Korean careful, halting. The storybook was simple, filled with animals and bright illustrations. Amaka stumbled over some of the words, her accent heavy, but Hannah giggled and corrected her gently. By the time they finished, the little girl was leaning comfortably against her arm, the kind of closeness that needed no permission. From then on, the bond only deepened. In the kitchen, Amaka began sneaking Hannah little treats. A slice of apple, a spoonful of honey stirred into warm milk. Hannah's laughter returned, a sound so pure that even the other maids found themselves pausing to listen. "Miss Hannah seems happier these days," one whispered to another as Amaka passed by. "She follows that cleaner everywhere," the other replied with a hint of disapproval. But Amaka didn't mind. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was simply giving what came naturally: kindness, warmth, and attention. One chilly morning, as Amaka was folding linens in the laundry room, Hannah padded in barefoot, her hair messy from sleep. "Miss Amaka," she whispered, tugging on her sleeve. "Can you braid my hair?" Amaka blinked. "Me? Yes. The nanny always pulls too hard." Amaka chuckled softly. She had braided her younger sister's hair countless times back in Nigeria. Kneeling down, she picked up the small comb Hannah had brought. With gentle fingers, she worked through the child's soft strands, humming an old African lullaby under her breath. Hannah's eyes fluttered shut, her face relaxed. When Amaka tied the final ribbon, Hannah whispered, "Thank you. It doesn't hurt when you do it." In that simple moment, Amaka felt something stir deep inside her. It wasn't just sympathy anymore. It was affection, a bond forming where she least expected it. That evening, Ji-hoon noticed. He walked into the living room to find Hannah curled against Amaka on the sofa, fast asleep, her little hands clutching Amaka's sleeve. A storybook lay open on her lap. For a moment, Ji-hoon stood silently at the doorway, his expression unreadable. Amaka froze, her heart pounding. She was just a cleaner. Was she overstepping? She fell asleep while I was reading," Amaka explained nervously, her accent more noticeable in her rush. Ji-hoon's gaze lingered on his daughter's peaceful face. For the first time in years, Hannah looked content, almost whole. Without a word, he stepped forward and gently lifted Hannah into his arms. She stirred, murmuring softly, but didn't wake. Ji-hoon glanced once more at Amaka before walking away, his footsteps fading down the hall. Amaka exhaled shakily. She didn't know what he thought of her closeness to Hannah. But in her heart she knew one thing: she couldn't pull away now. Not when the little girl looked at her with such trust. What Amaka didn't realize was that Hannah had already begun to see her as something more than just another maid. And soon that truth would come out in the most unexpected way. The rain fell hard against the glass that afternoon, turning the sky gray and the gardens outside into a blur. Amaka was in the living room, carefully dusting the shelves, while Hannah played nearby with a set of wooden blocks. The child hummed softly as she built a small tower, her brows furrowed in concentration. Amaka smiled to herself. It was rare to see Hannah so absorbed, so at peace. But then, in a flash, the tower toppled. The wooden pieces scattered across the polished floor, and in her rush to grab them, Hannah tripped. "Ah!" The sharp cry pierced the silence. Amaka dropped her cloth instantly and rushed over. Hannah sat on the floor, clutching her knee, tears welling in her eyes. A small scrape glistened red against her pale skin. "Oh, sweet one," Amaka murmured, kneeling beside her. She gently pulled the girl into her arms, wiping the tears that rolled down her cheeks. "It's okay. You're okay." Hannah buried her face in Amaka's chest, her small body trembling. It hurts. Amaka rocked her gently, the way she used to comfort her younger siblings back home. Shoo, I know. We'll be fine. You are strong, Hannah. She pressed a soft kiss to the crown of the child's head without thinking. At that moment, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Ji-hoon had just returned home. He stopped at the threshold, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. His daughter cradled in the cleaner's arms, sobbing into her chest. Hannah! His voice was calm but sharp. What happened? The little girl lifted her tear-stained face toward him, her lips trembling. And then, with complete innocence, she whispered a word that froze the room in place. Mama! The sound was small, fragile, but it landed like thunder. Amaka's eyes widened. Her heart stopped. She glanced at Ji-hoon, panic rising in her chest. Ji-hoon's expression hardened, though something flickered in his gaze. Shock, confusion, maybe even something deeper. What did you just say, Hannah? Hannah sniffled, pointing at her scraped knee. Mama made it better. Silence hung heavy between them. Amaka stammered, her voice low, trembling. Mr. Kong, I didn't she. But Hannah clung tighter, pressing her face back into Amaka's chest as if to prove her words true. I want Mama. Ji-hoon inhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. He stepped forward, his voice even. Hannah, she is not your mother. The child shook her head fiercely, tears spilling again. She feels like Mama. The words cut through the air, raw and unfiltered, the truth of a child's heart laid bare. Amaka felt her own throat tighten, emotion burning behind her eyes. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't tried to take a place that wasn't hers. Yet here was this little girl, broken and longing, giving her a title she hadn't expected but could not ignore. Ji-hoon extended his arms. Come, Hannah. But Hannah didn't move. Instead, she clutched Amaka tighter, as if afraid to let go. The room pulsed with tension. Amaka's heart pounded, her arms tightening protectively even though her mind screamed to let go. She was a cleaner. He was her employer. This was not her place. And yet, in that moment, the bond between her and Hannah felt unshakable, undeniable. Finally, Ji-hoon spoke, his tone quieter now, more troubled than angry. Miss Amaka. Put her down. Amaka hesitated, then gently pried Hannah's arms from around her neck. The child whimpered, but Amaka whispered softly. It's okay, sweet one. Your appa is here. She brushed the tears from Hannah's cheeks before placing her carefully in Ji-hoon's arms. Hannah clung to him reluctantly, her eyes still fixed on Amaka. Ji-hoon held his daughter close, but his gaze remained locked on Amaka. For the first time since she had entered this house, she saw something in his eyes. Not coldness, not indifference, but conflict. A question neither of them dared to speak lingered in the silence. What happens now? The air in the Kong mansion was different after that day. The word hung in the halls like an echo that refused to fade. Mama. For Amaka, it was impossible to forget the way Hannah had clung to her, the way her tiny voice had trembled as she claimed her in front of her father. She had not meant for it to happen, yet the moment replayed in her mind again and again, stirring emotions she didn't dare name. Ji-hoon had not raised his voice, but the stiffness in his posture, the sharpness in his gaze. It had been enough. Since then, his presence carried a colder edge whenever Amaka was in the room. That evening he called her to the study. The air was heavy with the scent of leather and books, and Ji-hoon sat behind his desk like a man carved from stone. Miss Amaka, he began, his tone measured. You have been good to Hannah. Can see that. But... His voice trailed for a moment, as though weighing his words carefully. Do not encourage her to call you that word again. Amaka lowered her gaze, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. Sir, I swear I did not tell her to. I know, Ji-hoon cut in quickly, his voice sharper than before. I know children act from their hearts. But Hannah, she is fragile. She has already lost enough. I cannot let her confuse herself more. The words struck Amaka like a quiet blow. She nodded, her throat tight. Yes, sir. I understand. But when she left the study, her chest ached. Because she did understand Hannah, and she knew the child wasn't confused. Hannah had spoken from need, from longing. And Amaka, despite herself, had felt it too. Over the next few days, Ji-hoon kept a closer distance. If he entered the room and found Hannah near Amaka, he would gently but firmly call her away. At dinner, he instructed the nannies to handle Hannah's meals instead of letting her sit in the kitchen with Amaka. Hannah noticed. "Why can't I stay with Miss Amaka?" she asked one evening, her little brows knitting together. "Because you don't need to," Ji-hoon replied, his tone firm. "She is here to clean, not to be your mama." The word made Hannah's lips quiver. She glanced across the table to where Amaka stood silently in the corner, her eyes lowered to hide the sting in them. Later that night, Hannah slipped quietly into the laundry room where Amaka was folding sheets. "Do you not like me anymore?" Hannah whispered. Amaka's heart twisted. She dropped to her knees so her eyes met the child's. "Sweet one, of course I like you. I like you very, very much. Then why won't Appa let me stay with you?" Amaka hesitated, searching for the right words. She brushed a strand of hair from Hannah's face, her voice soft. "Your Appa. He just wants what's best for you. He's trying to protect your heart." "But my heart feels better when I'm with you," Hannah said simply. The innocence of the words nearly undid Amaka. She hugged the girl tightly, hiding the tears burning in her eyes. "I am here, Hannah. No matter what. I won't leave you." Ji-hoon saw the bond growing still, despite his efforts. And though he told himself it was dangerous, though he reminded himself Amaka was only an employee, a cleaner, he couldn't deny what he saw. Hannah laughed more now. She smiled more. She slept peacefully at night instead of waking from nightmares. And all of it, had begun the moment Amaka stepped into their home. The thought unsettled him, because part of him feared it. But another part of him, one he tried desperately to silence, felt a strange sense of relief. It was late, close to midnight, when Amaka carried the last basket of laundry to the servants' quarters. The house was quiet, the staff asleep, but a faint light glowed from the study at the end of the hall. She hesitated. It wasn't her business. Yet something pulled her toward it. Through the half-open door, she saw Ji-hoon at his desk. His tie loosened, his hair slightly tousled. Papers were scattered before him, but his eyes weren't on them. Instead, he was staring at a small picture frame on the corner of the desk. Even from a distance, Amaka recognized the woman in the photo. Hannah's mother. Ji-hoon's expression was unreadable, but his hand hovered over the picture as though touching it might break him. His shoulders sagged for just a moment, the mask of strength slipping to reveal a man carrying far more than he let on. Amaka quietly stepped back, not wanting to intrude. But the image stayed with her long after she lay down to sleep. The following morning, Hannah had a fever. The nanny fussed nervously, unsure what to do. But Amaka didn't hesitate. She sat by the child's bed, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead, humming softly. Hannah clung to her hand even in half-sleep, her breathing uneven. When Ji-hoon arrived home that evening and found Amaka at his daughter's bedside, his first instinct was to bristle. "Where are the staff? The doctor?" "They've come," Amaka said gently, not looking up. "The fever is mild. She only needs rest and care." As if to prove her point, Hannah stirred, whispering weakly, "Mama," before drifting back to sleep. Ji-hoon's chest tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, to remind Hannah of the truth, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, his gaze fell on Amaka's hand, steady and warm against his daughter's small one. There was a calmness about her, a quiet strength that reached into the chaos he lived with daily. For the first time, he found himself wondering what it would be like if this woman, this stranger who had stepped into their lives, wasn't just a cleaner in his house. In the days that followed, Ji-hoon began to notice things he had ignored before. He noticed the way Amaka's laughter, rare but genuine, filled a room more warmly than any expensive chandelier. He noticed how she bent down to Hannah's level when she spoke, giving the child her full attention, something he himself often failed to do. He noticed how her accent wrapped around Korean words with softness, how her voice carried both gentleness and strength. One evening, he returned earlier than usual. To his surprise, the living room wasn't empty. Amaka sat cross-legged on the rug with Hannah in her lap. The little girl giggled as Amaka taught her a simple clapping game, singing an African lullaby under her breath. The rhythm was unfamiliar, the words foreign, yet Ji-hoon found himself leaning against the doorway, listening. Hannah's laughter was bright, her small hands clapping out of sync, but Amaka only laughed with her, patient and tender. For a brief, fragile moment, the coldness of the house seemed to melt away. Amaka looked up and saw him. Her smile faltered, and she quickly helped Hannah settle beside her. "Mr. Kong," she said respectfully, her tone careful. But Ji-hoon didn't scold her, didn't send Hannah away. He only gave a faint nod before walking past them. Yet inside, his chest felt strange, tight, unsettled. That night, he lay awake longer than usual. Hannah's laughter still echoed in his ears, along with the soft cadence of Amaka's voice. He told himself it was dangerous. She was an employee. Their worlds were too far apart. And yet, despite every reason to ignore it, his heart had begun to unfold. The first whispers started among the staff. "She spends too much time with Miss Hannah," one of the maids murmured as Amaka walked past the kitchen. "It's improper," another added quickly. "She should know her place." Amaka pretended not to hear, keeping her head down. But their words lingered. She had never wanted to overstep, yet Hannah clung to her as though she were the only safe place left in the world. Pulling away would break the child's heart. And truthfully, it would break Amaka's too. The gossip didn't stay within the walls of the mansion. At a corporate dinner one evening, Ji-hoon's associates mentioned it with polite but pointed smiles. "I hear your little girl has grown quite attached to a member of the household staff," one man said lightly, swirling his wine. "Children can be impressionable," another woman chimed in, her tone carrying an edge. "It would be unwise to let such bonds form too deeply. People might misunderstand." Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but the weight of their stares burned into him. The image of Amaka soothing Hannah, of Hannah calling her mama, pressed at the back of his mind. That night, back at the mansion, he found himself pacing the study. He told himself it was only gossip, but in his world, whispers could turn into daggers. Amaka noticed the change in him. He grew quieter, sharper. One afternoon, as she finished polishing the piano, he entered the room. "Miss Amaka," he said firmly, his voice low but heavy, "perhaps it's better if you keep some distance from Hannah." Her heart dropped. "Distance? Yes. You have duties here, and they do not include becoming too involved." Amaka lowered her gaze, fighting the sting behind her eyes. "I understand, sir." But later, when Hannah came running with her picture book, eager for another story, Amaka hesitated. Ji-hoon's words echoed in her mind. She almost turned the child away. Almost. But then Hannah's small hand slid into hers, warm and trusting, and Amaka knew she couldn't. "All right, sweet one," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just one story." The whispers grew louder. A cousin of Ji-hoon's came to visit one weekend and eyed Amaka with open disdain. "You allow this woman so close to Hannah," she said sharply in the hallway when Ji-hoon walked her out. "What will people say? A foreigner? A cleaner? Do you think this reflects well on your family?" Ji-hoon didn't answer, his silence tight and dangerous. But Amaka heard every word. That night, lying awake in her small room, she thought about her place in the world. About her family back in Nigeria who depended on her. About Hannah's arms clinging around her neck. Her heart pulled in two directions, between duty and love, between leaving and staying. One evening, Hannah sat beside her on the rug, coloring a picture with crayons. "Miss Amaka." "Yes, Hannah. Will you always be here?" Amaka froze. She swallowed the lump rising in her throat and forced a smile. "I'll be here as long as I can, sweet one." Hannah frowned. "That sounds like... maybe not always." The innocence in her voice broke something inside Amaka. She reached out, brushing the child's cheek tenderly. "Even if I'm far away, Hannah, I will always be with you here." She tapped lightly over the girl's heart. Hannah smiled, satisfied, but Amaka's own heart ached, because she wasn't sure how much longer she could stay. The whispers didn't just linger. They grew louder, pressing in on every corner of Amaka's life. She felt them in the sidelong glances of the staff, in the sharp comments from visiting relatives, in the way Ji-hoon's eyes lingered on her with unspoken conflict. One evening, she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, clutching her phone. Her mother's voice crackled through the line all the way from Nigeria. "My daughter, you sound tired," Mama said softly. "I'm fine, Mama," Amaka replied, though her throat tightened. "Work is. It is hard, but I'm managing." "You must be careful," Mama warned. "Foreign lands do not always welcome us. Do not lose yourself in their troubles." Amaka closed her eyes. She wanted to explain, to confess that her troubles weren't about herself, but about a little girl who had called her Mama and meant it with all her heart. But how could she? Some things were too heavy for words. When the call ended, she made her decision. She would leave. Better to go now than risk destroying herself, or worse, breaking Hannah's heart further down the road. But fate didn't wait for her to pack her bags. It happened on a stormy night. Hannah had been quieter than usual all day, her cheeks flushed, her little steps sluggish. By evening, her small body burned with fever. The staff scrambled, calling for the doctor. Ji-hoon rushed home, his face drawn with worry. "Appa!" Hannah whimpered weakly as he entered her room. "I'm here, sweetheart," Ji-hoon said quickly, kneeling beside her. His hand pressed to her forehead, but his touch, though gentle, seemed to do little to calm her trembling. Hannah turned away, restless, tears pricking her eyes. Then, through cracked lips, she whispered one word. "Mama." Ji-hoon's chest tightened. His gaze flicked toward the door, where Amaka stood frozen, her hands clutching the frame. He didn't have to say anything. Amaka stepped forward instinctively, kneeling by Hannah's side. With practiced ease, she dampened a cloth, wiping Hannah's burning face, humming softly in a lullaby that crossed oceans. Almost instantly, Hannah's breathing eased. Her trembling lessened. She clung to Amaka's hand as though it were the only anchor in the storm. Ji-hoon watched, helpless. He had money, power, access to the best doctors. But it was Amaka's presence, her voice, her touch, that soothed his daughter. Hours passed. Amaka stayed by Hannah's side, refusing to move. She stroked her hair, whispered comfort, cooled her fever until the child finally drifted into a deep, steady sleep. When the doctor arrived at last, he confirmed what Amaka had already seen. It was only a viral fever, nothing life-threatening. Rest and care were enough. But Ji-hoon remained at the doorway, silent. His eyes never left Amaka. Later, when Hannah was finally asleep, Amaka stood slowly, exhaustion written on her face. She turned to leave the room, but Ji-hoon's voice stopped her. "Miss Amaka." She froze. "Yes, sir." His gaze was unreadable, his tone quiet but heavy. "Why is it that only you can reach her?" Amaka's chest tightened. She shook her head faintly. "It is not me, sir. It is love. Hannah needs love and I just gave it." Ji-hoon studied her, his jaw tense, his eyes conflicted. For the first time, the walls around him seemed to crack. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a father who had no idea how to heal his daughter's broken heart. "She called you Mama again," he said at last, his voice raw. Amaka lowered her gaze. "I never asked her to." "I know." Silence stretched between them, filled with everything neither dared to say. Finally, Amaka whispered, "Maybe it is better if I leave." Ji-hoon's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Leave?" "Yes," Amaka said, her voice trembling. "Your world, it is not mine. People talk. They judge." And Hannah. Her words broke, her chest aching. "If I stay, I will only make it harder for her." For a long moment, Ji-hoon didn't move. Then in a low voice he said, "If you leave, you will break her heart." Amaka swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "And if I stay, I may break yours." Their eyes locked, his full of turmoil, hers full of pain. And in that fragile silence, the truth neither wanted to face became clear. This wasn't just about Hannah anymore. The house was quiet after Hannah's fever broke, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the silence that follows a storm, where every heart waits for what comes next. Amaka went about her duties with practiced calm, but her decision was already made. She couldn't stay. The whispers, the stares, the weight of being too close. It was all too heavy. More than that, she feared what her presence might mean for Ji-hoon. He had a reputation, a company, a family name. A man like him did not belong with a woman like her. That evening, she folded her uniform neatly into a small bag. Her hands shook as she packed, each item a reminder of the home she had built without meaning to. She paused when she reached Hannah's little hair ribbons, tucked neatly on her dresser after she had braided them last. Her chest tightened painfully. A soft knock startled her. She turned, and found Ji-hoon standing in the doorway. "You're leaving," he said quietly. Not a question but a statement. Amaka lowered her gaze. "It is for the best." "For who?" His voice was sharp, though low enough not to wake Hannah. "For you. For me. For Hannah." Amaka's throat tightened. "She will forget me in time." "No," Ji-hoon said firmly, stepping closer. "She won't. She has already lost one mother. If you leave, you will take away the only warmth she's found since then." Amaka's eyes burned, but she forced herself to stay strong. "And what about you, sir? What about your family, your business? People already talk. You can't afford this." Ji-hoon's jaw clenched. "For years, I've done everything for appearances, for business, for family expectations. And what did it give me?" His voice wavered raw. "An empty house. A daughter who cries at night. A heart that hasn't known peace since my wife died." Amaka froze, stunned by the break in his carefully built armor. Ji-hoon's gaze softened, though his voice trembled. "But since you came, Hannah laughs again. She sleeps without nightmares. And me." He inhaled shakily. "I find myself breathing again." Her lips parted, but no words came. He stepped closer still, his eyes locking onto hers. "Don't you see, Amaka? It was never just about Hannah. You. I've fallen in love with you." The confession hung between them, raw and trembling. Amaka's heart pounded, disbelief and longing crashing together. "Sir," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This cannot be." "It already is," he cut in softly. "And I don't care what the world says. Care about Hannah. Care about you. That's enough." Tears spilled down Amaka's cheeks. All her fears, all her walls seemed to crumble. She shook her head weakly. "I'm afraid, Ji-hoon. Afraid I can't be what you need." He reached out, gently brushing a tear from her face. "You are exactly what we need." At that moment, a small voice interrupted. "Mama." They both turned. Hannah stood in the hallway, rubbing her sleepy eyes, her voice fragile. "Mama, don't go." Amaka's heart shattered. She dropped to her knees, opening her arms. Hannah rushed into them, clinging desperately. "Please don't leave me," the child sobbed. Amaka held her tight, rocking her as tears streamed freely. "I'm here, sweet one. I'm here." When she looked up, Ji-hoon was watching, his eyes glistening. For once, there was no conflict, no hesitation, only certainty. In that moment, Amaka realized this was no longer just a house, no longer just a job. It was a family. Fragile, imperfect, but real. She wasn't replacing anyone. She was becoming someone new. Someone Hannah needed, someone Ji-hoon had chosen. And so, with Hannah clinging to her and Ji-hoon's steady gaze meeting hers, Amaka whispered the words that sealed everything. "I won't leave." 2 years later, the Kong mansion no longer felt like a palace of silence. The halls, once echoing with emptiness, now carried the sound of laughter, the patter of little feet, the warm hum of a household alive again. Amaka stood in the garden, watching Hannah chase butterflies across the lawn. Her braids bounced as she ran, her cheeks glowing with health and happiness. The once fragile little girl was now bold and bright, her laughter as free as the wind. "Careful, Hannah," Amaka called gently. "I'm fine, Mama," Hannah shouted back, grinning as she ran. The word no longer felt heavy with fear or secrecy. It was spoken openly now, with pride. Ji-hoon stepped out onto the terrace, his sleeves rolled up, his expression softer than Amaka had ever thought possible in the early days. He walked over, slipping an arm around her shoulders. She's growing so fast, he murmured. Amaka leaned into him, smiling. She is. And she's happy. Ji-hoon kissed the top of her head lightly. Because of you. Because of us, Amaka corrected gently, resting her hand over his. They stood in silence for a moment, watching their daughter, the word our finally feeling right, running across the grass. Life wasn't perfect. The world still whispered sometimes, still judged. But here, in this home they had built together, love was louder than the whispers, stronger than the doubts. Amaka thought back to the first day she entered this house as a stranger, just a cleaner. She could never have imagined that one day she would be standing here, not as a worker, not as an outsider, but as a mother, a partner, and a piece of the family's heart. Hannah turned suddenly, running back toward them with open arms. Mama! Appa! She cried joyfully, flinging herself into their embrace. Amaka and Ji-hoon caught her together, their laughter mingling as Hannah squeezed them both. And in that moment Amaka knew, despite everything, despite the road that had brought them here, this was exactly where she was meant to be. She was home. Thanks for watching this K-Whisper story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Blasian love tales that touch the heart. See you in the next one.